What's up, comic compadres, and welcome back to the Team Nerd Herd podcast, where our best advice for all of you is if you want to do it right, collect what you like. But let's start off with a little roll call, and I'm going to start off over here with JR. What's up, JR?
Nothing much. It's a good day in the neighborhood. This is JR, Rogue's Law. Happy to be here, Star Wars fan. You're a run-of-the-mill asshole and a Marvel fan. I'll pass off down to below to Big Rob, Famous Rob.
Famous Rob, Big Rob, Robert, Rob's Learn Haven on Instagram, and I'm excited to talk Star Wars today. Let's move on to Steve.
What's going on, Team Nerd Herd podcast? It's your boy Steve, aka Hip Hop's in Me, and I am super excited for today's interview on Sunday, the Lord's Day. And I'm going to go ahead and dish it on over to Nick.
Yo, what's up? Nick here, Firesale Comics, Bronze Ninja. Let's talk some Star Wars, guys. It's a little early. I'm having my cup of coffee. Let's go. I'm going to toss it on up to Alonzo.
You too?
All right. What up, nerds? This is Alonzo, a.k.a. Comics and Pops, and I'm ready for today. Today's going to be amazing. We're going to be talking some Star Wars, some Shadow Service, but that's enough about me. Over to you, Ian.
And what's up? My name is Ian. You can catch me at Hood Rat Comics over on Instagram, and all y'all know, man, I am Sith for life, Star Wars for life, always been, since I was like a teeny weeny 3-year-old, 4-year-old watching Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi up in the theaters. But enough about me. We got a special guest for you guys today, a very, very special guest. And you know what's up. All of us are like Star Wars fanatics. So let me tell you a little bit more about our guest. Our guest has worked on such projects such as Vikings, Pacific Rim, Doctor Who, Penguins of Madagascar, and Highlander. His current projects include writing a series for Sherlock Holmes for Titan Books, and a very, very favorite book of ours over here at the crew with Vault Comics called Shadow Service. But what we are really interested in is he is also the writer for the first run of IDW's Star Wars Adventures from 2017 to 2020. And he currently got the huge nod to lead all Star Wars fanatics down the Disney and Marvel's new Star Wars rabbit hole called the Star Wars New Republic. And I want to welcome High Republic, and I want to welcome Cavan Scott. What's up, Cavan? How you doing today, man?
Hey, how you doing? I'm doing well. It's getting late for me, but getting early for you guys, isn't it?
Oh, it's early for us right now, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But it's football season, so I'm up this early anyway.
Oh, there you go.
Where are you currently located at?
So I'm in Bristol in the UK. So Sunday evening here. You know, that point of the evening when my brain's starting to go. So if you see me suddenly slump off to the side, just shout at me or something.
I mean, if I could,
It's the Force. That's what it
is.
I would hand my coffee right over to you, man, virtually, and then you can do it. But that's probably
if we planned that, you could have done that, and I could have reached up and got a coffee. That would have been.
Oh my God.
You could have had your like Kylo and Rey moment where you pull the lightsaber out type thing.
Exactly, that would have been amazing. But next time.
In the
works.
Yeah.
But Cavan, hey, I'm gonna run right into Star Wars, man. I want to ask you, man, what are your Star Wars origins? Where did it all begin for you? When did the crazy fanatic fandom of you start with Star Wars?
Well, there was two things. There was I remember a very early Christmas, my grandma bought me a Obi-Wan Kenobi figure before I knew who Obi-Wan Kenobi was. And so basically I went, oh, good, you've bought me a old man. Brilliant. A doll of an old man. Great. Just what I want. Thanks, Grandma. And then I found out what it was. And then before I missed A New Hope in the cinema, but then so between New Hope and Empire, I picked up Star Wars Weekly, which over here was a weekly comic which reprinted the Marvel run from the 70s and 80s, and it came out every week. And in the back of it, there were things like Star-Lord. It was basically, this is what Marvel used to do in the UK. They had weekly comics because we had a weekly comic scene. They would do things like Star Wars and Transformers and things like that. And then they would crowbar things that were sort of the same from Marvel at the back. So, so it was Star-Lord for Star Wars. Transformers, it was Robot Man. Machine Man, sorry. That was my first. I picked up that issue before I'd seen any of the films. And it was the issue. And if anyone's followed anything I've written in the last couple of years of Star Wars, they might get where this comes from now. It was the first issue that had Jackson in it. That was my first ever introduction to Star Wars. So when I saw Empire, a year or so later, I was really upset that the big green rabbit wasn't in it, because I honestly believed, because I read him before I read Luke Skywalker. That's how weird it was.
You did rectify that, though.
Yeah, no, I've done my best. And so yeah, that was my beginning. So I got the weekly comic religiously after that, and then saw Empire that was my first film. And it went from there. But then I suppose the thing that really tipped me over the edge was Return of the Jedi, because by Return of the Jedi, I was just at the right age to go full on headlong into being a fan. And the scenes in Jabba's palace and on the barge blew my mind, and they still blow my mind a bit now. The fact that the special editions, there's so much to see in those scenes. And I had the storybooks, and the one thing I remember, I had the I don't know if you remember them. The old used to get like the record and the book, and the tape and a book, and then R2 would
classics.
You had to turn the page, and so the Return of the Jedi one, I used to just listen to over and over. I had that one on tape, and the tape went waffy. I played it so much.
Okay, that's all right.
You probably shouldn't have been scratching it though, Cavan.
Yeah, I know, and it was. And there's so many scenes when I watch Return of the Jedi now that I remember what sitting in my room listening to that tape, and when the Emperor says, this is a fully operational battle station, at that moment I go back to being a kid and turning the page to sort of see, because of course this was pre being able to own stuff, so it was the only way to sort of hear it over and over and over again. So that was my beginnings, and then it went from there, really. I mean, I was a massive nerd when I was a kid. It hasn't really changed. My to-do list is pretty much the same today as it was when I was 10, which is great, and I'm going to try and keep it like that for the rest of my life. But yeah, growing up in the late 70s, early 80s, Doctor Who, Hammer Horror, Star Wars, they were really my, what it was like to be a kid for me. So I'd say not a lot's changed since.
Oh my God.
Well, you're in good company, sir. You're in good company.
Good. I have to ask, since you're British and you brought it up, I know you did Doctor Who and Star Wars. What was bigger? What was the bigger, like, oh my God, this is awesome that I'm doing?
It's a really hard one, because Doctor Who is so much ingrained in my DNA, because obviously I some of my earliest memories of watching Doctor Who. So it was around 10 years before I was born, around. So by the time I was born and got into the age of watching it, it was when Tom Baker was in his height as the fourth Doctor. And it's been big over the last few years, but then it was huge, and everyone at school and the playground, it was Doctor Who, and then this Star Wars thing came on. Everyone was a bit like, that's not Doctor Who, is it?
That's what I'm saying.
And so, but for me, it just led from one to another, because both Star Wars and Doctor Who are science fiction in name, but I think they're far more science fantasy. There's that element of magic in both, literally, in the case of the Force. The Doctor, let's face it, she's a bit of a wizard. She lives in a box that's bigger on the inside, has a wand that does lots of things. There's that kind of sort of Narnia type things with the Doctor, and absolutely, I think, again, I think sometimes the best Doctor Who stories are the ones that play fast and loose with science. The Doctor themselves play fast and loose with science.
Oh yeah.
And I think I found it easier to go into Star Wars than say something like Star Trek, which I love, but it took me years to get into Star Trek, because that was far more sort of hard science fiction, military science,
serious.
And
back up the logic.
Yeah, and it was so while I eventually got into I think I saw Wrath of Khan, which sort of dumped me into Star Trek big time. But those two, they have the same sense of magic for me, and I do get the same sort of chills at points with Doctor Who and Star Wars. Now, obviously, Doctor Who, classic Doctor Who, very different ball game when it comes to effects and budget to Star Wars. But because when you're 11, 12, I don't think you really notice that. And for both, comics were a huge part of it. So the Doctor Who comic, again, that kept me going when Doctor Who wasn't on telly. Star Wars comic kept me going when I couldn't, see Star Wars regularly. So again, in my head, they're both quite mixed up. So Dave Gibbons' Doctor Who run, back in the day, and the Marvel Star Wars run, again, they're really interchangeable in my head to the point that I sometimes think I get them mixed up, you know, when I think about strips. So yeah, they are, the two franchises are majorly interchangeable in my head, and I get the same kind of love for both of them.
So let me ask you, how did when IDW tapped you for Star Wars Adventures? How did that happen? How did that happen?
Well, so,
I mean, you must have been stoked, right?
Oh, absolutely. So I've been writing Star Wars for a while by then, because I've been doing kids' books over here called Adventures in Wild Space, and which was a series of books that came out of here. They came over in the States, but I don't think they were so widespread over there. Over here, my first one became the UK #1 bestseller of all books.
Wow.
It was ridiculous.
Wow, it's impressive.
I don't know if you know, we've got a baker over here called Mary Berry who does cookery programs, and she was #1, and we knocked her off #1 in the book.
Wow.
And then I was
Mary.
knocked off by Roald Dahl, so I'll take that. So, you know, so
Yeah.
so I've been doing that for a while, and I was doing, at the time I was writing Doctor Who for Titan, and I'd been given a chance to write a Star Trek Deep Space Nine comic for IDW, and that was around the time they were doing the Adventures, but they pitched for Adventures and got it. And so they asked me, and I was one of a number of people who were asked to pitch stories. And I think I was asked to pitch 3 stories, and I pitched 10 because I thought, well, one of them might hit. And I never expected to write the first issue. I never expected to keep coming back so often as I did. I thought this was a bit of a one-time gig. And that's how it happened. So they picked the story, the Rey story that we had for issues 1 and 2, and it kept going. And so I thought, this, with all my early Star Wars stuff, I thought I'm going to do everything I can in this issue, because this could be my only chance to do Star Wars. So, like, one of my first Star Wars books for kids, I put Darth Vader in it, because why wouldn't you? And I thought, A, they're going to cut him out. And he's only in he's got a Skype call with the baddie, and I thought they're going to cut that out, but they kept it in, and I thought, sorry, I'm going to have to do that, because again, I may never have the chance to write Darth Vader. Little did I know that I'd be writing Vader for the next few years. But so in all of those early ones, it was a case of what would I want to do in Star Wars within this area? I'll just try and do it all. And Star Wars Adventures, I don't think anyone expected it to be as successful as it was, and still is. It was a shock to everyone. I remember turning up, I think it was at New York Comic Con, and seeing it on the side of the IDW booth for the first time, and just going, this is mad. And it was great. It's one of the happiest jobs I think I've had, because of cons and seeing families and seeing parents coming up with their kids, and that's what I love Adventures for, because it did really turn into a family book. That the idea was always to make it all ages rather than kids, so it can be picked up by families, and it worked. And so we used to have families come up, and there'd be the kid getting their copy signed, and then the mum and dad would get their copy out and get that signed. Perfect. And it was great. So Adventures, I think Ventures what sort of catapulted me from doing the stuff I was doing for Star Wars to the stuff I'm doing now. So I've got a lot to be grateful for that book.
Nice. I also noticed you had a piece of Empire Strikes Back point of view, which you brought in Jackson into that. A lot of, I was surprised when I saw the bunny. Every chapter at the start of it, they show a silhouette of something key. And you see the bunny ears, and you're just like, okay, there's only one thing that can have the bunny ears, and it's not Playboy. So,
no, in Star Wars anyway.
I get now why you have him in there. Makes sense.
Absolutely, because I used to try and, when I was a kid, I used to imagine where he was in the story and try and come up with these things. So I got to write Jackson for Adventures, just basically because I kept saying as a joke, we should do a Jackson story. We should do a Jackson story. And then one day they phoned up and said, well, we got a backup for the annual. Do you want to do one? Do you want to write a Jackson story? I was like, yeah, of course I do. Can I have a Mazer in it as well? And they sort of rolled their eyes and went, go on then. And so we wrote that 8-page story, and we thought that was it. And the response to that 8-page Jackson story was incredible. And so the next year they said, do you want to write another one? But do you want it to be the main story in the annual? And I was like, are you sure? And they said, who would you want to team him up with? And I said, well, Lando, obviously. Again, thinking there's no way they're going to let me do this. And so the second one became Lando and Jackson. And then for the third one that's just happened, they were like, do you want to do another one? I'm like, surely you are. This has got to be a Jackson, And it's become an annual event that we've got a Jackson annual, which is just bonkers. It's just nothing. Just it amazes me all the time. And so then when the chance had come up to do from a certain point of view. Now, I wasn't up for doing a story originally in it because I was part of the first book and they were trying to get a load of new people in. And also, to be honest, I didn't really have the time to do it. But as a joke, I said, oh, this is a chance for me to do Jackson. And they went, well, actually, it is if you want to. I was like, oh, God. Right. Okay. And so I had to actually come good and do it then. But yeah, I mean, it's funny that I have become, in certain areas of Star Wars fandom, synonymous with the big green rabbit.
But you know what, though, man?
Cool.
You know what it's like? I think all of us we're older. We're in our 40s now, and I was the same way. I was like, where the hell is the rabbit? Like he never showed up in the movies. I wasn't old enough to read the comics, you know, and I would see him everywhere, and I'm like, where's the freaking green rabbit, man? Like,
I know.
I think if they would, could you do us a favor and talk to Filoni and Favreau and say, can you bring Jackson and Mandalorian, bro? That'll blow people's minds, man.
Well, because I think Filoni has his own views of Jackson, which is why his skeleton turns up in the Clone Wars. But now we've proved it's not canon, because that's just another Leppy. So yeah, I mean, God, I am trying. It has become a bit of a joke with Story Group that if I put a story in, it's either got an Ewok somewhere, or it's got Jackson, or a relative of Jackson, or you know. So he hasn't turned up yet in any High Republic thing. When he wouldn't anyway, because he's not that old. But
his grandpa.
Yeah, exactly. And let's face it, they must have big families. So
rabbits make a lot of rabbits. You know what rabbits like?
Exactly. So, but you know, there's a lot of years of High Republic ahead. So you know, we who knows? He might turn up at some point. So
you got that big nod, and you did that for like 3 years, right? 2017 to 2020. Yeah. And then they came over and nodded you for the biggest book in Star Wars for a long time, the High Republic. How did that? Tell us like the process. You said it was like a 10-year process, like the High Republic. Like
that just feels like it was a 10-year progress. So it's been like 2 or 3 years now. So it was at San Diego Comic Con. I had a breakfast with Mike Seclane from Lucasfilm Publishing, and so we've worked together a lot. At that point, we were working on Adventures, we were working on the Vader's Castle series. I'd been doing the Choose Your Own Adventure books for the kids as well, and it wasn't unusual to sort of get together with Mike at the cons. That's when, you know, where we have a chance to talk to each other and see each other, and we're both big horror fans, so we usually sit there and don't talk about Star Wars at all and talk about horror.
Right up my alley.
Yeah, well, you know, it's always the best way. And there's a reason that most of the stuff I've done in Star Wars, even the kids stuff, has a horror basis. You know, it's how we became friends as well. So anyway, he was chatting away, and he went, "So I want to ask you if you'd be up for doing something." I was like, "Oh yeah, fair enough. You know, I'm a writer, I'm a freelancer. Of course, you're going to say yes." And he said, "We're doing this big project. How would you like to come to Skywalker Ranch?"
Ooh.
I was like, "What now? I'm sorry. Are you talking to someone else? You know,
give a plague or something to go there?"
Yeah. And he said, "We're doing a big project." He said it's a launch of a new sort of like. He didn't use the word expanded universe because that would have its own connotations. But you know, expanded on the publishing line. It's going to be a commitment for a few years. Would you be interested? And it will involve a trip to Skywalker, and because obviously I'm like, yep. Do that, yes, and whatever it is, you know.
Let me just sign up another line.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, do you want me to open a vein now or later? And he said there's going to be 4 other people, but I'm not going to tell you who they are because I've talked to some of them. I haven't talked to the others, but you'll all know before you get there. So I'm like, this is how murder mysteries start. But you know, so. We said yes individually, and unbeknown to us, most of us were at that con that week, and they've been chatting away, not knowing the other person had been asked. And the trip to Skywalker was coming up, and we suddenly got an email saying, "Hello there. This is it was just before it was called Project Luminous. It was called All Stars or something at that point. Project All Stars. Here are the other 4 people you're going to be working with," and it listed it, and there was a big sense of relief because I could work with those people because you have no idea, you know, what have I signed up for here? And we went to Skywalker a few weeks later, and that's sort of the beginning of the process. And it's been 2-3 years now of living it pretty much every week. It's been slightly longer than we thought it was going to be this year, but everything's been slightly longer than we thought it was going to be this year. So yeah, that was the beginning. So it was a breakfast where I wasn't expecting anything other than to talk about Peter Cushing and Dr. Terror's House of Horrors, and it turned into something completely different.
So I noticed one of the big things about this new characters you've got, if you can go into a little more detail, I noticed one of them is a Trandoshan. Mm-hmm. Now, typically, those are like the bad guys. The boss is the only one that everyone knows as a Trandoshan.
Yeah.
There's been, in the old legacy stuff, was a couple. Can you talk about that person a little bit, or anything about him, and what kind of lets you to do a Trandoshan as a Jedi Master?
That's dope.
Yeah, sure.
That's interesting.
I have to be a bit careful what I'm saying.
Yes,
because obviously,
understandable.
Obviously, Disney are watching me at all times. I'm pretty sure there's
Hi,
cameras.
Disney.
Yeah, exactly. Wave to the mouse. So he came from Skier. When we did the original pitches for what would become the High Republic, each of us made our own pitch of what the story should be, and then we sort of discussed it and pulled it apart. And High Republic was chosen. But before that point, Phil Noto had done a bit of concept art for each idea. And one of them, I think most people have seen it now, is one of a load of Jedi standing in a line, and there was a Trandoshan as one of them. Yeah. And that fascinated me because I have a real problem with monocultures in science fiction, and so we mentioned Star Trek earlier on, all Klingons are bad, and then we found out that actually some of them are right. It's been an issue I've had with Star Wars in the past, is that that an entire species, everyone has to have the same personality or same morals or same whatever, because let's face it, we're a species and we don't have that. It was a moment that I could jump on and say, "Oh, hang on, he's," and again, I'm an old EU reader, so I know, Hut says Jedi, yeah, bring it on, So I was like, okay, well, we could have him, and I made it a bit of a pet project to try and work out the story of each of those Jedi, and so Skier was one of the first ones that I came up with. And this was before I got the assignment to write the Marvel comic or any of it, really, because at the beginning we didn't know what we were going to be writing. We just knew we were creating the overarching story. And so then as soon as I got the Marvel, I was campaigning that he would be a part of it, because I fell in love with him, and it was, and it is absolutely going, that trying to play with people's expectations. And he's a complicated character. He has issues, because let's face it, characters have to have issues if they're going to be interesting. So
bring it more dynamic.
Yeah, and the thing as well about the Jedi is these people get picked up when they're literally one or whatever. So they have no idea what it's like to be a Trandoshan. All they know is what it's like to be a Jedi. That's their entire life. So I find that fascinating with the Jedi, that actually they have no species. Their species is Jedi, because that's all they've known from an early age. Slightly different in the High Republic, in the fact that the Jedi are a little bit more out there. They're a little bit more out with the people rather than sort of held up on Coruscant in a temple. So that was the beginning of Skier. So thanks to Phil Noto for conjuring up a Trandoshan Jedi that I could then run with, because the response to him has been amazing. And again, we put out the concept art, not really thinking much of it. And it was really interesting to see about those early characters, which ones people are automatically, without knowing a thing about them, automatically going towards. And of course, there's part of me going, I always knew that people would go for a Trandoshan Jedi, because obviously. He's a joy to write. He's really interesting, and I can't wait for people to see where it's really because it has felt so long since we've been able to talk about this, and we still can't talk about a lot. It's just weird to think that under a month it's going to be out there. It's just a really odd feeling. And yesterday we put a digital sampler out via the Disney Books website, and it's just really odd to think that people are out there reading the pages or reading the chapters of the books. But yeah, I'm going to be writing Skier for hopefully quite a long time.
So,
Nice.
Cavan, you kind of mentioned like that the Jedi are actually out and about. So, can you kind of let us or kind of tell us when, like, basically when does the High Republic take place? You know, because like again, for me growing up, and watching the Star Wars movies, they were always like essentially in their own world. They just didn't like really participate and really help other people. So I kind of want to know where does this take place?
So the High Republic takes place 200 years before the prequels, and it's before the sort of decline into the prequels and what were the politics of the situation. This is like the last gasp of the Republic being amazing and the Republic being a glittering thing. So it goes back to, you know, a more civilized age, you know, an elegant weapon for a more civilized age. That's exactly where this entire project came from. It's imagining when Obi-Wan talks in his hut on Tatooine, when he talks about what the Jedi were, we want to see that. We want to see the Jedi out in the galaxy. We want to see them righting wrongs. We want to see them, you know, swashbuckling. We want to see them with robes, you know, billowing. Everything that we as kids,
My wildest dreams.
imagine the Jedi to be, you know, and the prequels for, you know, for whatever you think about the prequels, the Jedi in the prequels are, you know, it's a very dark time for them. So they're not perhaps the Jedi we imagined. You know, at that point, they have complications that they didn't expect. So the High Republic, internally in universe, no one in the High Republic calls it the High Republic. It's like, imagine it in universe is that, you know, by the time of the New Republic and the time, you know, up to the First Order or whatever, it's the historic period known as the High Republic, because it's literally what it is. It's the Republic at its height, the Jedi at their height. They've had peace for 800 years. You know, they've been able to expand. Science has been going through the roof because they've been pushing out to the frontier. So they're really starting to push out into the outer rim. And the Jedi go with them, and I think that's the important thing here. So the Jedi don't just have a temple on Coruscant; they have temples everywhere, and they have outposts everywhere, and they live with the people. So you know, it's not just a case of the Jedi. Even when they're on a planet, they're not just behind the walls of their temple. They're out in the streets. You know, the people know the Jedi, and there are thousands of them. And the people respect the Jedi, and they rely on the Jedi. But the Jedi aren't subservient to the Republic. They're equal partners in what's going on at the time. You know? So there is the Jedi Order, and there is the Senate, and they are equal. So this was the universe we wanted to imagine. This was the Jedi we wanted to see. So the time when the High Republic starts, and with Charles's novel Light of the Jedi, it's at a point where everyone's going, it's never going to get better than this. And none of them know that that's really true. Because, you know, obviously it's in Star Wars. There's going to be a war because it would need to be. So, you know, we join them at the point where the Jedi are probably more comfortable than they've ever been. They're more, they're easier in their own skin. They interpret things differently because they haven't had to do anything but defend the peace. And there's problems, obviously, because it's a big galaxy. But a Jedi at this point only has to light their saber, and everyone goes, "Oh right, yeah, sorry, yeah, I won't do that." And suddenly they. I mean, the whole point for a Jedi is that they don't want to light their saber at this point. Oh, someone's phoning me. That's good. They don't want to light their saber.
It's Disney. They're like,
yeah, exactly.
A mouse.
I was joking, honestly. If I suddenly get back, you know what's happened. So yeah, the Jedi, they never want to light the saber. They never want to get into a fight. In that pure Jedi thing, you know, that's the last resort. And through the stories of the High Republic that we're going to tell, they're forced into lighting the saber. And that act alone changes the way the galaxy works.
So what sort of adventures? Sort of adventures can we expect from them?
Well, we throw them into a big calamity, which is called the Great Disaster. Great in the sense of it's momentous. It's not like everyone going, "Whoa, fantastic!" there's a major disaster that happens in hyperspace, which shuts down hyperspace for a while. And they find out it's all to do with this band of pirates called the Nile, who have been causing trouble for years, but are in little independent pockets. And then they realize that they're a larger force. And so that's sort of the catalyst for all the stories. But yeah, there's adventure stories, there's exploration, there's horror stories. That, you know, we're trying to get the entire gamut of the kind of stories we can tell in Star Wars, but it's all round about this conflict that they had, growing conflict that they have with this group of who they think are just pirates, and they've dealt with pirates. You know, they're like, well, we've seen pirates, but they've never quite seen an organization like this. And that's where the adventure comes from. So
we gave a little love to Skier. What about Keeve?
So yeah, Keeve's fun. Yeah. She at the heart of the Marvel book is their relationship, and it is a relationship between a master and an apprentice, which obviously we've seen masters and apprentices before, but with this one, it's literally on the cusp of her becoming a knight. So I don't think there's any spoilers now. You know, the issue 1 is her trials. I think that's been out there now. So her story is the fact that she's a Jedi who's come up through the ranks, just as every Jedi always has. Never expected to be in the center of everything. Always thought she'd be at one of those outposts, one of those temples, being a Jedi, doing what she has pledged her life to do, and suddenly finds herself on this massive space station called Starlight Beacon, which is it's got a mobile temple in there. It's got everything you need. Again, it's run by the Republic and the Jedi together. She finds herself knighted and placed there, and so suddenly she has spent her entire life thinking she's going to be off on the sidelines, and is now right in the middle of what's going on in the High Republic. And so she has a little bit of crisis of confidence, which for a Jedi is a terrible thing to have. And and I mean, it's what we'd call imposter syndrome. She suddenly finds herself with all these masters, including her master, who now suddenly isn't her teacher anymore. He's he's one of the masters that she's working with. Here. And how does she work with that? You know, the fact that she's still calling him master. He's suddenly not calling her Padawan. He's not even calling her by Keeve. He's calling her Trennis. Well, what's changed there? What am I to him? You know, because they have had a very paternal relationship, which we see in flashbacks and things. And he's got stuff going on that she doesn't realize. And so it's basically how she has to stand up and work out what kind of Jedi she's going to be, because she thought she was going down one road, and because of the events of the High Republic, is forced down another road, and doesn't realize how good she actually is. You know, she's not a chosen one. She's not, you know, she's just a good Jedi who doesn't realize actually what she can bring to the Order.
Nice. I also saw that you got a book down the road coming, which congrats. Yes. Second book. Obviously, I know you can't say anything about it because it's way down the line. But I'm looking forward to that coming out, and hopefully, so it sounds like it's coming right around Comic-Con. So hopefully they do a nice little exclusive.
If we get Comic-Con, you know, it's hoping. You know, so
we're hoping. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's out in June next year. So Rising Storm, it sort of takes on the events from Charles's novel, and it's the next one in that series, and brings in people that you would have met in other parts of the initiative. And yeah, that's been exciting to write alongside writing the Marvel and some other stuff as well.
And I've already pre-ordered that.
Oh, fantastic! Thank you.
As soon as I heard about it, I get all the Star Wars books.
Good.
I even, like I said earlier, I've got even this one.
See. I love those little books.
They're a blast. They're easy reads.
I'd never written a Choose Your Own Adventure book before I did those, because when they were commissioned, they weren't Choose Your Own Adventure books. They were just books. And then right at the last minute, they went, by the way, these are going to be Choose Your Own Adventure now. And I was like, oh, are they? Good. How do I do that then? And I literally had to get an old Choose Your Own Adventure book and reverse engineer it and pull it to bits and work out how they did it, and convert the story that I was going to write for the Han and Chewie one into a Choose Your Own Adventure book. But the great thing about it is that you can regularly blow up the Millennium Falcon, or in one of them, I kill R2-D2, which I would never be able to do.
That's true.
Why? That must have been an exercise pulling your story apart like that.
It was, yeah. It was. I mean, and then you do look like you're either tracking a murderer or you're a murderer because you've just got pieces of paper everywhere with lines pointing. So I wrote 4 of those, and then did some ones for the Alexa app as well that you could play along, some little mini ones, and that again was another things I never. Star Wars is constantly giving me things I never thought I was going to do. I never in a million miles thought I'd write choose your own adventure books. Had no real passion to write choose your own adventure books, but I loved doing them. It was fantastic.
Let me ask you a question real quick, Cavan. So during the dark years, between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens, like all of us older guys, either you gravitated to the books, the comics, or the video games, right? I took my nephew Eddie, and he knows I took him down a rabbit hole of video games because he's a gamer. And one of our favorite games is Knights of the Republic. We played that together. It's so awesome. How in the High Republic did you guys pull any of the stories from those video games? Did you guys look at the video games to help you create the new adventure that you guys are going on?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is, again, all of us, we're all fans. So, to a certain, I mean, you talked about sort of the dark period. For me, it was comics, because as I've alluded to before, comics were always my touch point for everything. So all the Dark Horse comics I amassed over the years. And so the Knights of the Old Republic for me was the comic. And then I sort of, I'd love to be more of a gamer than I am, but it's just time most of the time. So I didn't really, so I played Knights, but it was comics and then the books, the novels. So, and I know the same for like Claudia was a massive Knights of the Old Republic fan. So we didn't pull stories from them, but the tone of what we want to do with, like, when you see Jedi together, I absolutely, my 2 favorite comics were Knights of the Old Republic and the Republic comic from Dark Horse, the one that's sort of Clone Wars before the Clone Wars, and they were my touch points when I started to think about what I was going to do in the High Republic, and when I was pitching the High Republic as a concept. So I went back and reread Republic from beginning to end because it was a good excuse to, because I love it. And then because I was working on things like Dooku Jedi Lost and Ventress was in it, again, I could go back and reread all the Ventress issues. And so it's still, I think people are going, a lot of people don't understand that it's not the Old Republic, the High Republic. It's a new thing, it's a different thing. And the Old Republic is in Star Wars is still a thing, I mean, that's pre-Rus and Reformation, pre-Bane. That's there. Just because we're not dealing with it in canon, it's there. And I'm forever putting in references that I'm told, really, do you have to do that? So no, I don't. I'm going to try.
Old guys really want it, really want it, right?
Yeah, and the thing is, from our point of view, can you imagine the pressure to do the Old Republic and do it on the scale we're doing this?
Yeah.
Part of the joy of doing the High Republic is the fact that it's a period that even in Legends never really was explored. So we had you have Old Republic, then we nip forward to, well, let's face it, you go back to Dawn of the Jedi, Old Republic. You nip forward to sort of prequel era, and then beyond thousands of years. And it was an area of time which actually we thought, well, there's no expectations for this, so we can make something of it. And if we do Old Republic, the expectations are going to be huge, and we're going to be fighting those expectations at all time, So I would personally, as well, I'd much rather, I would adore to write something in the Old Republic at some point. I'd rather build something new and do callbacks and and have the spirit of it coming through. Because, as again, this is we're talking years ahead of us now with this project, so we've got to have space to be able to move, and so that was the joy of this. And it was always started as there's lots of rumors that it was a film, and then turned it was like, no, it's always been books and comics. That was where the High Republic came from. It was us sitting down here and what could we create for publishing for Star Wars? What corner of the galaxy can we create? And then you get situations when they do the Disney call last week and the words High Republic are mentioned. But, that's amazing. But it started with books and comics. And that was always the point. So again, that was one of the reasons to find somewhere new, because it's something we could create from scratch. without having to worry about what do we bring back into canon, what do we leave out of canon, what do we, and it's always going to be controversial doing that kind of stuff. I know, after being involved in bringing stuff back to canon, it is controversial because some people go, well, why didn't you do that? And other people going, well, why have you put that in when you could have put this in?
You can never satisfy everybody.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it just opens up such a can of worms. But yeah, I mean, personally, God, I would love to go back and do some Old Republic stuff at some point in my career, because it got me through the sort of the latter years before before the Disney buyout and everything. That era, I've gone through peaks and troughs in my excitement over Star Wars. It's always been there, but there's been points when it's been high, and then I've gone a bit, oh right, yeah, and then something else will happen, and I come back. And the Knights of the Old Republic were definitely one of the moments that it just pulled me in.
These young kids, they don't understand, man. These young kids, they don't understand how hard it was for us between.
No, they never had to look at.
They don't.
Never in a lifetime.
All I get from young kids is like canon. This is all I get. Well, that's not canon. I'm like, get the fuck out of here. You know, like you don't even know, man. Like we were grabbing for anything Star Wars for like a good 20 years, 30 years. So
I have such a loose sense. I'm one of those people and go, I don't really care if it's canon or not, as long as it's good Star Wars. And I think it comes. We talked about Doctor Who. It comes from I had my two biggest franchises that I was into, and they both sort of went away. And then we both had wilderness years where books and comics and audios and everything kept them going. And with Doctor Who, you can't even think about canon because the show didn't think about canon from one year to the next. The Daleks had 3 origin stories. So I'm a little bit, I get a bit loosey-goosey when it comes to canon. I'm like, well, if the story's good and it sort of fits and you can make it fit in your head, isn't that what being a fan is? Because you can make everything fit in your head. That's the fun bit. I don't want it sort of prescribed to me. This is the way. I was like, yeah, but I want to work out how that works. I mean, I still try and work out how the Ewok cartoon works in modern canon because, why wouldn't you? And again, one of the notes I got the other day was, "Are you trying to bring back everything from the Ewok movies?" Yes, I could play that.
Why not?
Make Caravan of Courage real.
But and then my theory is, there will be people like us who will get it and get the nod and get the wink, and they will go, yes, brilliant, I get that. Kids won't even know if they're reading stuff. It's old. It will just seem like Star Wars. And people who've not got any experience of it, it's just a bit more Star Wars. I don't get the problem with bringing things back. Easter eggs, I'm a big fan of Easter eggs, as anyone who's ever read any of my stuff knows, as long as it doesn't derail the story. And as long as you're not sitting there going, what? No, what does that mean? Because Star Wars has that stuff from the beginning. When Obi-Wan mentions the Clone Wars, we don't know what the Clone Wars are. Mm-hmm. We didn't know what the Clone Wars were for a long, long time. We didn't know what the Jedi were. We didn't know. And you can see that when you read the Marvel comics and the Jedi turns up and he's wearing a suit of armor. At that point, it was all just stuff dropped into Star Wars to make it sound cool. And you can do exactly the same now. You can drop references in from the EU, from sort of the proto-EU of the Marvel run and all that kind of thing. And as long as you do it well, and as long as you're respectful for it, and I say more the merrier, because, as long as you're not taking people out of the story. So as you read the High Republic, you may see things that pop up of stuff from the old canon and new canon, because, obviously you have to be careful, but I love all that stuff. And I want to
jump in with a non-Star Wars question real quick here. Mm-hmm. You said you're a Hammer horror film fan. What's your favorite Hammer horror film, and how much was your mind blown to see all those actors move on to Star Wars?
Oh, incredible. Well, I think it was probably a little bit of the other way round as well. So Cushing I knew as Moff Tarkin, and then sort of discovered him as Frankenstein. The Frankenstein series of films are probably up there. They're my height when it comes to from Hammer. Frankenstein Created Woman, I think, is genius. The daughter, I've got to say, Daughters of Dracula. Is it Daughters of Dracula? Yes, that's the one where, where Christopher Lee isn't in it because he wasn't contracted. That's an amazing vampire film, and everyone should watch it. But one that I really love, and I keep going to, is a film. It's one of the lesser-known Hammers called Plague of the Zombies, which is sort of pre-Day of the Dead zombie. So it's like halfway between a traditional voodoo zombie and the zombies that we know. And I love that film. It's just got such a quirky little...
Almost like White Zombie, the old...
Yeah, so if you don't know it, it's basically... someone goes to this town in Cornwall in the south of England where there's tin mines and realises that the mines are being mined by the dead now because the local squire has a zombie factory. And it's just genius. It's just absolutely brilliant.
So, Cavan, I want to thank Rob for that segue. That was amazing. So you said that you love horror, and you've created this book or this world called Shadow Service.
Yes.
And it is amazing. We just love how much kind of love these and depth these characters have, and you've included a lot of this horror aspect, this gore, and this mystery. Can you kind of lead us in a little bit about this?
This is what I was saying about I haven't stopped doing what I was doing when I was 10. So growing up in UK, you have to like Bond, otherwise you get thrown out. It's like, it's one of those things. It's the un-British thing in the world to not like James Bond. So obviously, and I grew up in the Roger Moore era, so it was a very different Bond to what we have
Cavan,
now.
Why do you think my name is Ian?
Oh, very good.
I found this
My dad was a big Bond.
That's awesome.
Siri just tried to look up James Bond for me. You can't see it, but I've got my signed photo of Roger Moore watches me every day from above my desk.
Roger Moore is the man.
Yeah.
So grew up loving Bond, grew up loving in Doctor Who. There was UNIT, which was this military group who used to work with the Doctor and get rid of the monsters. Hammer, we had a comic called Scream over here in the mid-80s, which had an amazing script called The Dracula File, which was Dracula was escaped to Britain in the 70s. The KGB knew this and thought, fantastic, that's them dead. And one KGB officer decided he would defect because he couldn't morally say doom Britain. So every week with him chasing Dracula around Britain, 1970s Britain.
That's a great story premise.
I loved it. And so there is all of these things have been in my head ever since. And things like the Hammer House of Horror, where it was that sort of very, again, Hammer Horror in the movie is very gothic. We've all seen those films. Hammer House of Horror is very much of the modern time, contemporary stories. Amicus films around the same time. They used to do the Portmanteau movies like Vault of Evil and The House of Drip Blood. Again, largely contemporary stories with horror in it. Very normal people meeting monsters. That has just been in my head for so long. And years ago, I remember scrolling down on a piece of paper, MI666, and loved that idea. And have been trying to write MI666 stories ever since. They've appeared in various different bits and bobs. And there we go. Welcome to MI666. There's been variations of MI666 and other things. And then when I had the chance to work with Vault, I was talking to Adrian at Vault, and we had a chat, and it all came together, and it was like, so it became the story that is now Shadow Service. So yeah, it's loving spy movies of the 70s, of loving things like the new Mission Impossible franchise, which I think are great, and Bond on so many levels, and want to do that kind of team book with monsters. And then the last part of the puzzle was getting Corin Howard on art, and I hadn't met Corin before. I worked with Corin before on Star Wars. And I knew she was a horror fan, and Adrian brought her in because when I pitched it, we didn't have an artist attached, and the gore and the monsters and the demons has increased issue on issue because she loves drawing it so much, and I love what she does.
Amazing.
So I didn't actually think it would be as gory and monsterific as it is, but those first couple of issues, when I saw how much fun she was having, I was like, well, that's it. We're going full on Fangora here.
I know it's. I was about to say it's a great. I mean, you have hopefully I'm saying his name right, like Coil.
Yeah.
He's like always eating just
corpses,
just whatever's kind of lying around in order to kind of replenish himself. I mean, a lot of this stuff, I've not seen it in another comic book besides like zombie type. But I mean, you have this character that has his own capacities and be able to interact with everybody else. I mean, it's great. I mean, I love a lot of the little things that you put into this book.
Well, thanks. That's brilliant. I mean, Coyle's amazing because, again, he's a character that came from a different book originally. So he came from a fantasy novel I wrote years ago, like a Second World fantasy novel. To Call of the Ghoul was in this secondary world fantasy novel, right? This big doorstep that we'll never see print. And again, you have these things and you write them, and it was like one of the first things I ever wrote. And it was like, I've always wanted to find a place for him. And he was never supposed to be a part of the MI666 story. And when I was putting the story together, I needed that kind of character. And I was like, well, it's Coyle. And again, the version of Coyle in Shadow Service is my favorite version of that character, which I've been trying to write for years. And so many parts of Shadow Service and me going, I've been trying to write all these stories. Well, why aren't I writing them together? Because actually then it will work. And it has. And it's
totally has.
Thank you. And I love the team, that team dynamic of a team that don't really get on, but have to get on, and so it's been a lot of fun to write. We're just working. We've got issue 5 coming out just before Christmas. Then we take a break for a few months, and then I think in March issue 6 comes out with the trade for the first run. So to have a sort of mid-season relaunch, just try and bring some new people in as well. And then we've got 10 issues at the minute and hopefully more,
perfect.
So it's a case of, it depends how that second launch goes. It's been doing really well to give us the 10 issues. And so now we're hoping that I've written it. I've finished writing it. I want to write more. Corinne wants to draw more. She's on working issue 7 at the minute. So we've got stories again of that team running forward, and people have not read it, obviously go and read it, but there's a central character called Hex who's like the spy master who looks like a little kid but is not a little kid in any way.
He's amazing,
and his is the story I want to tell next, and we see bits of Hex in this run of 10 issues, but I'm gonna have to try and do my best to get beyond that issue 10, because there is the story of Hex and what Hex is and how Hex became the head of MI666, and that's where we want to take it. So it's been great. It's one of those things. I it's not a vanity project in the fact that but it's what I've always wanted to write. I feel sometimes am I being really self-indulgent here, because it's like, but they tell you write what you want to read, and that's absolutely what I want to read. So
me too.
So hopefully it's going to be have a long history ahead of it. The response has been amazing, and we're blown away. And Vault is it's just an amazing place to put a book together.
Well, I know my LCS owner. He's really pushing that.
Excellent.
So
it's great. And we've got some stuff planned for the sort of the second part of the arc to try and get it out to more people. So hopefully it'll just grow and grow.
Hey, but let me ask you some rapid fire questions. Because we don't want to keep you too long. But I want you to strap in your seatbelt, man, because these are going to come out of left field. Might be, all right? Okay. There's some controversial questions here that we really want to know, okay?
Okay.
So the first question, fish or chips or bangers and mash?
Oh, fish and chips.
Oh, man, I'm a banger and mash guy, man. I love bangers.
Don't get me wrong, I love bangers and mash, but fish and chips. Yeah.
Fish and chips? All right. You and my wife will get along. She's a fish and chips person, too. Favorite home restaurant that you would recommend us to go to if we were in your town?
In Bristol. Oh, unfortunately, it's gone this year.
Pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID. Well, there's tell you what, if you come to near where I live, there's an amazing cafe that I'm going to go very British here. There's an English breakfast, which is second to none. A big full English breakfast, bacon, sausages, black pudding, eggs, beans, the whole lot. It's called The Chapel. It's phenomenal. We're hoping it's going to reopen, and it's the coziest little cafe. It's an old church that's been turned into, and when I say it's like really old, really tiny as well. It's like it was a chapel, and for years it was a bike shop, mountain bike shop, and then this cafe opened, and it's the best cafe in the world. But unfortunately, they've had as everyone had, a really torrid year, and we don't know at the minute if they're going to reopen when we come out of our next lockdown. but we're hoping to. So if you can create a time machine and you've ever wanted to try a full English breakfast as they're meant to be, go back pre-COVID and try it there.
All right. Least favorite Star Wars movie. What's your favorite Star Wars movie?
Return of the Jedi.
Least favorite Star Wars.
Oh, see, don't ask me questions like that.
Come on, least favorite Star Wars. Come on, we gotta know
that one.
We gotta know.
You know,
Last Jedi.
Doesn't mean you hate it. It just means out of the
It means
rank.
least. It means we all love them.
The one I would go to least is episode 2. Let's put it
Episode
that
2.
way.
Okay, cool.
Fair enough.
I have a complicated relationship with the prequels.
Oh,
I can
did you
understand
see? Did you hear me mention, man? Like between I said Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens.
Yeah.
Like I have a big issue with those. So
But you know, but then we've got the Clone Wars, and that does a lot of good.
that saved it. That saved.
I love them. I love all three.
Yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong. If it's a Star Wars movie, it's a good Star Wars movie. in my
Filoni
opinion.
saved the Clone Wars.
With the sequels, I have the added thing that it was that because of those films, my kids are Star Wars fans because of that level.
Nice.
So
New generation.
and they are family films for us. So we regularly put on the sequels because the girls adore them. So, and you know, so for me, any kind of Star Wars, there like anything, there are elements of Star Wars I don't like, and there's elements of Star Wars I love. But it's all Star Wars, so it's all good.
Well, one element that we need to know is color of lightsaber.
Oh, red.
Who would be your master then?
Sorry?
Who would be your master? Who would train you?
What, the one I'd have to kill eventually.
At least he got stuff.
Well,
You're in good company with Ian and JR.
yeah, I know. Well, also I've got the accent. I'm either got to be Empire or Sith. So, well, you won't want to be trained by Palpatine because let's face it, he never wants anyone to be.
I mean, we'll give you an extended universe too. You can have Bane. You can have Nihilus, Malik, Raven.
Oh, Raven. I think Ray. I know, but tell me then I'd have to kill my favorites. Actually,
Paradox of Sith.
I know the paradox. I think I'd like to be trained by Bane because I get obsessed with Sith lore, and let's face it, that was his bag. You know.
Yeah,
so,
and he was the best.
Yeah, and as long as he doesn't make me wear, you know, an armor made out of insects, I'm all right.
And last but not least, man, Acquiring Minds want to know, man, are you Team Leia, Team Rey, or Team Padme?
I'm probably Leia. I have to be Leia because of my age, I think. You know, my daughters would be Team Rey on so many levels. But for me, it's always Leia. It's in every possible sense. Yeah.
I remember during Return of the Jedi, my dad would put his hand over my eyes during the whole Jabba battle. And I was like, what is that? Dad? Wow. You know?
I got to add one more. Han or Lando? Han or Lando?
That's
big one.
That's hard. It's Han.
It's got to be Han.
Really? No, I'd go Lando.
Cloud City, man, did it for me. You got to be Han.
It's Billy D. Williams.
But no.
So the last New York Comic Con, I was staying in a hotel. Disney very nicely put me up. I was staying in a hotel in just down the road from the con. And the first night I went out and met some buddies and came back and had a few drinks and came back with some pizza. And I was walking back in and this massive car drew up. And I just knew through the force who was going to be in that car. And Billy D got out of the car and just stood up and went, and the entire bellboys and everyone just fell about themselves. And I so wanted to go up and say, "You're Orlando Calrissian," but he was just working the room of all the stuff. He was like going through and this was like two years ago, or whatever. So he was going through all, like going up to the guys on the desk, the bellboys and everything, and just working the room completely and being Lando and just being a star and having selfies taken. And I just really didn't. I didn't know what to. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt with that. So I went in and got the elevator and pressed the button, and the doors closed, and they opened again, and Lando walked in.
Oh my God!
And I completely go to pieces, and I just go, "All right." as if he's going to answer that. And he was just on the 2 floors up, and I sat there just going, and so I went, bye then. So my entire conversation with Lando Calrissian is all right, and bye then, and that was it. The door shut, and I just went, "Oh God!" I just loved the fact how happy he was making everyone in that lobby.
He actually is one of the nicest guys I've ever met. I met him years ago at a local con.
Yeah.
He took a picture with me, signed a Colt 45 ad. But he signed it as Lando Calrissian at first.
Oh, that's awesome.
Nice.
So, yeah, super nice guy though.
No, he was great. So, but actually, I quite like that being my Lando story. You know, I think if I met Lando, I would go to pieces as well. So,
I would just have a heart attack. But hey, thank you, Cavan. I want to say Cavan because that's our nickname for you, bro. Thank you, Kevin, for coming on.
No worries.
Really appreciate you coming and spilling a little bit of the beans, man. We're hoping the community will get a lot out of this. But I want to ask you, man, can you send this out?
Okay. If you want to do it right, collect what you like.
Whoa.
Show me the one whose safety deems such destruction.